Let it be. For me, your man, Louie T. Welcome to the command post. You know what it is. Post up. Take command. Of course, I'm your commander in chief, Louie T. Thank you for joining me. So, over this year and a half span in which this organization has done a complete 180 and turned the prospects of this franchise around from one of the worst run franchises in sports and a bottom feeding team in the NFL to one of the better organizations and one that is really exciting and the future seems extremely bright. And in doing that, they've made a ton of right decisions. They've pressed a lot of right buttons. And a lot of times it was to the dismay of fans at the start, right? I mean, think about the hire of Dan Quinn. Not a lot of fans were excited about that hire. It's easy to have revisionist history now and look back on that situation and say, oh, yeah, we knew he was the right coach. No, the hell we didn't. Now, there were some out there that loved the hire, but most of us were stuck on Ben Johnson. And after that ship sailed, and we kind of knew that, we didn't really know what was the recourse, but we didn't want it to be Dan Quinn necessarily. So we came around very quickly once we saw him start to assemble the staff that has been just fantastic. And one of the best hires that came was not one that initially was made, in that being Kliff Kingsbury. If you recall, there were rumors that we were potentially looking to bring in a guy like Chip Kelly, which I was vehemently against. We'll see how he does with the Vegas Raiders in his third stint now in the NFL. First as an offensive coordinator, though, the first two times as a head coach. Neither of them went well. And I don't think Chip Kelly's offense is made for the NFL. But that said, we'll see what happens there. But I want to know parts of him here in Washington, right? And we did not have Jayden Daniels at that time, right? We didn't know who our quarterback was going to be. We did know we held one of the top two picks in the draft, so we knew it was going to be, one of three quarterbacks, Caleb Williams, Drake May, or Jayden Daniels. We just didn't know which of the three at that time. But whoever it was, I didn't want Chip Kelly anywhere near them. A lot of you, when we got wind of Kliff Kingsbury potentially being available, remember, reports had come out that he was going to sign with the Raiders, and that he was going to be their offensive coordinator after spending a year at USC with Caleb Williams. And so we didn't think he was even in the mix here. And then we find out he hadn't signed his contract yet. Magic Johnson was working the phones. The next thing you know, Kliff Kingsbury was coming to Washington. And I initially was excited, probably more so excited because it wasn't going to be Chip Kelly than I was excited because it was Kliff Kingsbury. But I also knew that Kliff Kingsbury was a bit of an innovator. And I thought he was a much better offensive play caller than he was a head coach. That's where he failed, I believe, in Arizona, is that he didn't understand how to galvanize 53 guys. He didn't understand how to be a leader of men necessarily. He wanted to just call plays, right? And so this gave him an opportunity to do that. So I was excited for that opportunity for him to come in here, whoever the quarterback was going to be, and give this offense some life. And I knew he would do that. To what degree, to what extent, I wasn't sure. But I do remember saying this very early on, and I caught some flack for this. I said, you guys better enjoy Kliff Kingsbury while you can, because he's going to get another head coaching job, right? He's going to come here, and whoever the young quarterback that he's able to get his hands on, they're going to do wonderful things. Again, how wonderful, don't know, but it's going to be good enough for him to get attention and eventually another head coaching job. And some people killed me in the comment section. He doesn't want to coach. Again, he's already said he just wants to be a coordinator and call plays. And I'm like, that's bullshit. Nobody wants to just be a coordinator, right? That's a rarity. Like, you might have failed 3 or 4 times and said, you know what, I'm good with being a coordinator, but Kliff wants to be a head coach again. And he's already said as much. But initially when he took the job, yeah, that might have been something in the back of his mind. Like, yeah, I'd rather be a coordinator for a little bit, but he wants to be a head coach. And I also had people telling me, why are you worried about that now? You don't know what he's going to do, yada, yada. I'm like, trust me, if this quarterback that we get is legit, And Kliff is what I think he is. He won't be here for very long. And it seemed like that process happened so quickly. The way he gelled with Jayden was phenomenal. And this video is just an ode to Kliff Kingsbury because, in my mind, and I hope I'm wrong, but I'm treating him like Ben Johnson, right? He had a chance to leave this offseason. He had a chance to go. Now, I don't think there were jobs out there that necessarily tickled his fancy. And New Orleans practically said, here's the contract. It's blank. Just put in your name and the amount that you want, and it's your job. And he was like, nah, I'm good. Appreciate the opportunity, though. And that was the right thing to do because, as we can see, that organization right now is a mess. Their quarterback situation, it might be the worst in football right now, and I just don't see any light at the end of that tunnel. That said, there were other opportunities that were out there that he could have pursued, but he decided to focus on this team's success in the postseason, and I'm grateful to him for that. But eventually, when the right opportunity presents itself, and I think it's going to be this year, he's going to be gone. But once again, when that bridge gets here, we'll cross it. But I've already mentally started to make preparations in my mind, and I know the organization, and more importantly, I know they've already started to make those preparations for who's going to be the next guy up should he vacate, right? Which is why they've held on to all their stuff, which is why they didn't let David Blau leave for, a lateral job this offseason, because they want all their ducks in order, right? So nonetheless, I wanted to come here and talk about why Kliff Kingsbury was the perfect fit in marriage with Jayden Daniels, and why his pace and space offense was a godsend and has been so effective and efficient. And it's going to be hard as hell to stop in year 2 with Jayden Daniels once again, despite everyone's notion out there in the national media that, defensive coordinators now have film, right? So let's talk about some of the ancillary reasons why Kliff Kingsbury has been phenomenal here as an offensive coordinator in just 1 year's time, coming in here and giving us something we haven't seen on offense since the 2015, 2016 seasons with Kirk Cousins, right? So first thing, I think he was the perfect coach for Jayden's development. Kliff himself, being a former quarterback, sees it from that quarterback's lens. So I think he was a guy that I thought was a perfect fit for what, you needed to have for a young quarterback in terms of mentorship. And then, not to mention, DQ and everyone else did a phenomenal job of surrounding him with other former quarterbacks in the building. Tavita Pritchard and David Blau and obviously Kliff Kingsbury, all guys that have played the position, see it from that quarterback's lens. And, having a veteran in there like Marcus Mariota with all that experience, there's just so much wealth of information there and experience that can help Jayden's development. But Kliff has worked with the likes of Baker Mayfield. He's worked with Patrick Mahomes. He worked with Kyler Murray. He's seen development at the highest levels. He's seen elite talent. He's learned how to cultivate elite talent. And I thought that the marriage between Kliff and Jayden was a match made in heaven. It was the perfect pairing, and we've seen the byproduct of that play itself out on the field. I think Kliff has a very similar personality to Jayden as well, right? Kind of lately, kind of a very reserved, laid back, demeanor. Definitely a guy that'll joke with you though once he gets to know you, and when it's time to take care of business, he's locked in and he's serious. And so I think, again, that those personalities kind of match up very well. So I thought he was the perfect coach for Jayden's development. That's number one. Number two, I thought that his ability to take input from players was something that was a breath of fresh air here as a fan watching from afar. One of my biggest gripes with past coordinators, Scott Turner, very, very much so the case with Eric Bieniemy, where they heavily relied on their system, right? They didn't want to hear from players just run the play, run what I tell you to run it at the depth I tell you to run it. And, irregardless of what they're playing, this is what we're running and it should work no matter what, right? That was their mindset. They were very rigid. They didn't want input from players. Hey, coach, I'm seeing this look. I know we can run this against it. He didn't want to hear that, right? Just run the play, right? And so I love the fact that during the Cleveland game, Jayden can run over to Kliff and say, hey, they giving me one-on-one on the outside. Let's take a shot. Next play, De'Ami Brown down the sideline, touchdown, right? I love the fact that Jayden can go to Kliff in a crucial situation on 4th down and say to Kliff, put the ball in my hands, right? I can do it. And against Tampa Bay, 4th and 1, game on the line, essentially, he turns to Jayden, or excuse me, 3rd and 1. He turns to Jayden, gives him the football. Not my favorite play. I became very jaded with that quarterback keep bootleg that I felt like teams were going to eventually stop. And nobody except the Eagles actually did stop it the entire season. I hope they don't continue to run that in 2025. But it was very successful, but barely successful. As teams caught on to what we were doing, he was just so athletically gifted that he found a way to make the play work, whether it was against Detroit the following week in a similar situation, obviously the Tampa Bay game, and countless other times where we were in that naked boot, essentially, and Jayden was able to get to the corner and get the first down. But at the end of the day, his ability to take input from players, and I think that all stems from DQ, right? DQ talked about going up to some of the veterans and asking them, like Deebo Samuel, for instance, and saying, hey, what are some routes that you love to run? Is there something in that you like to run that's not necessarily in the playbook or we haven't had you running enough of? Let us know. Like, we will find ways to implement that and get you in positions where you feel like you can be the best version of yourself. I also love Kliff's ability in big moments to think players, not plays. And he said this very early on. And you remember, I came to you guys running and screaming, like a kid that just came outside to a new car with a bow on it, right? After just getting my driver's license. I was so excited because for so long, I wanted a coordinator that, in certain situations didn't say, well, I'm going to run this concept because this is what I run in this situation. And no, you get down inside the 5, you get down inside the 7-yard line, forget about concepts. Like, that's why Scott Turner's red zone offense stunk to high heavens. That's why we couldn't convert a 2-point conversion. That's why we couldn't get the ball in the end zone via the pass when Scott Turner was here, because Scott Turner was so fixated on his damn concepts, he didn't get the ball to guys that could make it happen for him down in that green area, right? Terry, Ertz, these were guys we were featuring. Brian Robinson Jr., guys that had a nose for the end zone. We featured those guys in those moments. There's a reason Terry broke the single season touchdown record at the receiver position for the Commanders in 2024. Why? Because in every game that we got down in there, we were looking for either one of two players, Zach Ertz or Terry McLaurin. Defenses knew it and they couldn't stop it. How many times did we throw the slant? We were begging for slants to Terry for years. Kliff comes here, and in 1 year, Terry's catching slants for touchdowns, seems like every other week, right? Had the slant for the touchdown against the Giants. Had the slant for the touchdown against the Titans. Terry had 2 touchdowns in like 3 different games and 2 touchdown grabs against the Saints. He had 2 touchdown grabs against the Giants in the second game. So you got to see Terry kind of blossom when a coordinator said, you know what? I'm going to get you the football when it matters the most. Zach Ertz, same thing, right? We heard all, training camp, all offseason that Jayden and Zach Ertz were building this relationship and that Zach was becoming his safety net in critical situations. And we saw that. And we've always said that for a young quarterback, the tight end is his best friend. It is his security blanket. It is his safety net because that's the guy usually closest to him. That's the check down. That's the safety valve. That's the guy that he is able to see readily available in his sight. So, and it's usually the biggest target he has, right? Tight end's going to be 6'5", 6'6", right? Going to tower over the running back and most of the receivers. So it's an easy target for him to get the football to as well. Ertz, a sophisticated route runner, big target, and a guy that just knows how to get open and make himself an available target, was so instrumental in Jayden's development and his success in his rookie season. And Kliff Kingsbury understood that and took full advantage of it. And you saw it time and time again in the overtime win over Atlanta. The throw to Ertz there to win the game. A big third down conversion touchdown against Detroit to really, push that game to the brink for the Commanders to put it in a position where they could, get away with that victory. And countless other times where Ertz was just massive for the Commanders in the red zone. 2-point conversion plays, you name it. He was fantastic, right? Terry, going back to Terry in the Tampa Bay game, playoffs, back of the end zone, fourth down. Like this isn't a play. These are players. That's the same concept they ran to Terry against the Arizona Cardinals, right? Went back to that again on a crucial situation. Same result as it was in Arizona. Back of the end zone, touchdown, Commanders, right? So you're not thinking necessarily plays as much as players. How do I get this guy the football? And that's a testament to a coordinator not having an ego, not forcing his scheme on his players, but rather saying, I'm going to take my players, the best ones, put them in the best positions to succeed and get them the football and let them do the work and make me look good. And that's what Kliff Kingsbury, and it takes a coordinator with a very minimal amount of ego to do that, right? And Kliff Kingsbury checks that box. But the thing that I love the most about Kliff Kingsbury, and I got some more intel, just this past week, having a great discussion with someone that is out at the park, and his pace and space and his attention to detail are the two things that I think are absolute home runs for Kliff Kingsbury. I think it's probably his superpower as of right now, right? The pace and space was a game changer for the Commanders this past season. When you look, and I talked about it early in the year, you remember me continuing to just harp on the amount of space that the Commanders create in their pass game with their offensive sets. How they get the ball out of Jayden's hands quickly, how they force the defense to run over and over and over again, and how they get up to the line of scrimmage with tempo. And again, it takes a very good and special quarterback to be able to run that offense as effectively as Jayden did. But not only was it Jayden's ability, it was also Kliff's ability to get them into situations, minimize the verbiage, right? So that it wasn't a whole bunch that Jayden had to do, simplify things so that he could get the call out to everybody so everyone knew what their assignments were, but also creating advantages. One of the things that teams look to do in the NFL is they want to do what is commonly referred to as putting a defender in conflict. And I think Kliff Kingsbury has done a tremendous job of putting defenders in conflict, because that's the name of the game offensively, is can I isolate a defender, put him in a position where he's got to make a decision. And whatever decision he makes is the wrong one, right? You're going to make sure that he's wrong. That's what the high-low concept in the NFL is based off of, right? You take a defender, usually it's a linebacker, and you run some eye candy in front of him, shallow cross, right? And then you run a dig route, right? Or drift route, right? Right behind him, right? And if you're a linebacker, you much rather give up the shallow cross in front of you, right, than the dig route behind you, because that's more of a chunk play than the route in front of you. You can rally up and tackle if they throw the shallow cross. Now, that receiver might be faster than you, and if he's already got a running start and there's no one there to slow him down, you may not be able to catch him anyway, but you take that chance. What you don't want is somebody on that in-breaking route, that deep dig, hitting that, catching it in stride, like a Deebo Samuel, for instance, lived off of that in San Francisco. You catch that dig route in timing and in rhythm, and no one is there to slow you down. That could turn into a massive play, right? So as a linebacker, you're put in conflict. Whatever decision you make, the quarterback is there to make you wrong. And my favorite game to look at Kliff Kingsbury's brilliance was the Detroit Lions game. And like I said, I just recently talked to someone that shared some information with me. And one of the things that they told me was the week of the Lions game, they said that it looked like Kliff Kingsbury didn't sleep. And I remember us joking about Kliff. You know, his eyes looked sunken in. You know, he looked like he had been drinking Red Bull and coffee, and he was, you know, high off caffeine, and he was just in the lab, just trying to cultivate the perfect game plan to defeat the Detroit Lions. And that person told me that he, you know, was walking around the hallway. He was locked in. He had play sheets that he was writing on. He wasn't even looking up. They said they saw him at least 4 times that week. And every time they saw him, he was in the same posture, looking down, writing notes, got his play sheet. And so they said they had never seen him in that light before, right? And that Lions game plan was a thing of beauty. It was so pristine in nature. And then for them to go out and execute it the way that they did, it's the perfect example of attention to detail, pace and space, and Kliff Kingsbury just being locked in as a play caller. I'll give you a couple examples from that game and why I think this offense is just going to be brutal to stop in year 2 of Kliff Kingsbury and Jayden Daniels. You think about the Terry touchdown on the wide receiver screen, right? Seems simple in nature. It's a numbers game, right? But we go back to pace and space, right? So that wasn't necessarily the pace portion of that as much as it was space. One of the things Kliff did in that game was he widened the splits of the wide receivers in that game, which was genius by Kliff. Why was that genius? Because he knew going into the game that the Detroit Lions were among the most aggressive teams blitzing the quarterback. Aaron Glenn's MO that season was blitzing the quarterback, applying pressure, making the quarterback uncomfortable. They did it to Sam Darnold 2 weeks prior in the season finale, made him look a pedestrian, turned him back into a pumpkin, and he was seeing ghosts like he was back in the Jets days, right? And they knew that Jayden Daniels, being a rookie, they were going to try to take advantage of him and see what this rookie could withstand. And knowing that the Lions couldn't get pressure with 4, that they were going to have to blitz to generate, you know, any sort of pressure, Kliff Kingsbury was prepared. And he was dialed in. And one of the adjustments he made was he widened the splits of the receiver. What does that do? They love to blitz off of the slot. They love to bring up Brian Branch, who is this chess piece. You can play him deep. You can play him as that underneath defender. You can play him close to the line of scrimmage. You don't know what he's going to do, right? And so one of the things they love to do with Brian Branch is blitz him. And he's usually right there off the slot. You don't know if he's covering the slot or not. He's kind of creeping up towards the line of scrimmage. And then snap the ball. Here comes Brian Branch. Here comes a free defender. And all of a sudden, your quarterback is panicking, right? Well, what they did effectively in the game, remember, Jayden Daniels was blitzed more in that Lions divisional round win than any game of his career to this point. He was blitzed over 60% of his offensive passing snaps in that game. He attempted 34, I think, 34 or 35 snaps. He was blitzed on 19 snaps in that game, if I'm not mistaken. Or 16, excuse me. I think he was blitzed on, he had 34 attempts, and I think he was blitzed on 19. I think I had that right. 19 snaps, right? And it was a masterclass on how to handle the blitz. I think he ended up being like 12 of, I got these numbers all jacked up. I got them confused. Let me see if I can pull up the numbers real quick. because I had the numbers in my head, and now they're gone. See. So he was Jayden Daniels in that game was 22 of 31 for 299 yards and 2 touchdowns. He was blitzed in that game 16 times. So just over half. So right around that 60% range, right? He was blitzed 16 times. He completed 12 out of 16 passes on those blitzes for 191 yards and a touchdown versus the blitz. He absolutely shredded them. And one of those plays was the wide receiver screen to Terry McLaurin. And while this was so brilliant by Kliff, if you watch that play again, look how far out Terry McLaurin and the 2 receivers are that are blocking for him on that particular play from the end man on the line of scrimmage. You don't see that very often. That's not something that you customarily see NFL teams do. That split, they were almost, if not outside the numbers, okay? They were that wide, okay? They were out there by the numbers. And what that forced Detroit to do on that play was declare the blitz, because that play was set up to where if you have the numbers, then you run the ball. It's a handoff. If they've got numbers outside, if it's 3 defenders for 3 receivers, then you run the football. If it's 2 defenders for 3 receivers, then you throw the screen to Terry, right? It's simple math, right? Well, what the Lions like to do in situations like that is disguise it. So they would line up their safety, right, over the stack, that bunch formation that's out there, and make it look like it's 3-on-3, right? We don't have numbers. We'll hand it off. And then they come with the blitz last second. And so all of a sudden now, here comes Brian Branch off the edge. Now you run into a run blitz, and it's either no gain, loss of 1 or 2, and it's ineffective. They got you, right? Or even if you decide to pull it and try to throw it, here comes Brian Branch. He jumps in the air, bats the ball in the air, picks it off, whatever, right? But because you made the split so wide and they want to blitz, now they have to declare. Now you can clearly see that blitz coming because he can't go all the way out there. He'll never get there. I used to call that, when Jack Del Rio was here, the moon blitz. You'll never get to the quarterback from that far away, right? I don't even know why you would attempt that, right? So he can't go all the way out there to kind of show like, oh, I'm in coverage, and then try to come on the blitz. He's too far away. So he had to stay, declare that he was blitzing. Jayden can easily read, okay, I got 2-on-3 out there, right? So I got 3-on-2 rather out there. I'm throwing this to Terry immediately. So he rolls up, throws it to Terry. Perfect blocking by the 2 receivers out there. Terry splits that seam, and now it's a foot race between him and Joseph, the safety, and Terry wins the foot race, and it's a touchdown. That's all Kliff Kingsbury. That's all game planning, attention to detail, widening the splits. It's just ingenious, right? Give you another example. You got the blitz by the Lions on the 4th down to Terry on the shallow cross. And again, what did I just talk about? Putting a player in conflict, right? So high-low concept. Who do we like to go to in the red zone? Zach Ertz. So what do? They send Zach Ertz on a deep over, right? Over the middle of the field. Linebacker has to get depth to kind of take Ertz away. Terry comes on a shallow cross. So because of the depth that linebacker gets trying to take away Ertz, now Terry's able to get open on the shallow cross. Jayden, savvy vet move as a rookie, backs up, buys time because the blitz is coming. No one's accounting for this blitzer. So he's backing up, giving Terry time to clear that linebacker so that when he throws it to him, he can then turn up the field and get the first down. Jayden backs up, allows Terry to clear the linebacker. Linebacker chooses Ertz by getting depth instead of coming up and taking away Terry. So you put him in conflict, right? Make him wrong. Hits Terry. Terry pins balls his way up the field, gets to about the 2-yard line. I think Jeremy McNichols scores a play later. And again, it's another example of Kliff Kingsbury and his masterful ability to put guys in positions to win. Another example in that game, and the final one I'll give you, I can give you so many more, but Zach Ertz, critical third down in the red zone. Commanders don't want to settle for field goals. They're looking to score touchdowns. What do? You send Zach Ertz in motion, right? What does that motion do? It forces the defense to declare what they're doing. If no one goes in motion with Zach Ertz, of course, you've got zone coverage. If someone, runs across the formation with him, you've got man coverage. So what happens? Zach Ertz goes in motion. Guy follows him. Jayden immediately knows I've got Zach Ertz one-on-one with the defender. I'm taking my guy, right? Ertz runs a beautiful route, one of the best routes I've seen him run all season long. That stem on that thing without slowing down is a thing of beauty. Gets inside of the defender. Jayden puts it on him. Easy touchdown. And the Commanders are now up 31-21 before the half. It's that kind of execution from the Commanders that we saw from Kliff Kingsbury, and the attention to detail that he showcased throughout the year, whether it was, finding ways to create space to get guys involved, or it was finding ways to make the game easier for Jayden Daniels, right? The Lions are going to blitz. Instead of putting your quarterback in a compromising position, give him the tools he needs to make it easy on him to read the blitz, see it coming from a mile away, and deliver the football. And Kliff Kingsbury did that throughout the course of the season. But when we needed him the most, and I actually thought he put together a really good game plan against the Eagles that was being excellent. Look, the Eagles weren't going to give up anything over the top. Jayden was going to have to take the checkdowns. He was going to have to throw the football underneath, which is why I thought Deebo Samuel, this is why I talked about what I talked about. You got to go get a guy that can make something happen with the ball in his hands, because if you're playing against Philadelphia, like Terry did on the slant where he broke the tackle and scored, you're going to have to do that against Philadelphia, because they're going to play that 4-high shell, right? They're going to keep everything in front of them. They're going to play on a string. They're going to be disciplined. And if you can't make a guy miss, if you can't take a 2-yard gain and turn it into a 6-yard gain, if you can't take a 6-yard gain, turn it into a 12-yard gain, you're going to struggle against Philadelphia. They're going to force you to snap the football over and over and over again, because in their mind, something is going to go amiss on this drive. Whether Jalen Carter gets pressure, or someone else blows up a play, or you make a mental mistake, or they get to you because of the pressure, something's going to go awry on the drive, and you're either going to get stalled out, you're going to turn it over, or you're going to end up having a punt, or you're going to have to settle for a field goal, but you're not getting in the end zone because we're going to make you snap it 15 or 16 times. And if you can do that and make us pay at the end of that drive, hats off to you. Do it again. So this is why it's important. And I thought they put together a nice game plan. Ertz clearly ate. It was unfortunate that we couldn't have guys hold on to the ball, because I really think Jayden was poised to do what he had done, just weeks prior in this Week 16 contest. I truly felt like he was primed and ready to come back. We were in the same position we were in the last time we were playing the Eagles, down 2 scores, heading into the fourth quarter with the momentum. And unfortunately, Eckler fumbles, and then that quarter ended up being a quarter from hell. But Kliff Kingsbury has been spectacular. And you're going to see more of that. And I'll leave you with this. Part of the reason I'm so confident is 2 reasons, really. 3 reasons, really. 1, you got Jayden Daniels. That's above all else. But I'm talking about Kliff Kingsbury right now. 1, you got Jayden Daniels. But 2, last year, Kliff had to adjust to not having the best tackle situation, right? Had to chip on both sides. You had to keep guys in for protection. There were times where, instead of having 5 eligibles, you had 4, or you had 3, or you had 5 get out, but it was on a delay, right? Your last 2 guys, Eck would chip on one side, Ertz would chip on the other side, and then they would get out into their routes. It's not the same as 5 guys, as soon as the ball snapped, getting into their routes, right? It changes the way you can call plays. So that's going to be something that changes with Laramie Tunsil and the rookie Josh Connolly Jr., manning up your tackle positions. You feel a lot more confident that you should be able to run. Why do you think Kliff wanted Connolly so badly, right? Because now I can call all of my stuff. Now I can open up the full breadth of my playbook, right? And then 3, I still think there are plays and tricks and things that he's got up his sleeve. We saw the cute Austin Eckler play against the Giants in week 2 last year. We saw the double pass that, remember, Luke McCaffrey, former quarterback. They tried a double pass to him in the first game of the season against Tampa Bay. Jayden Daniels was open. He refused to throw the football, right? They did the double pass again late in the season. Well, this one wasn't a double pass. This was like a toss back to Diami, who was coming across in motion. And then Diami launches it to Olamide, and Olamide's wide open and he drops it. So there are more tricks up his sleeve that we haven't seen that makes this offense fun and innovative. And Kliff is constantly upgrading, right? He's always part of the reason he saw Josh Connolly. He was scouring college football, looking for more innovative ideas, right? So I just think Kliff's going to come back with a bag full of tricks, reloaded with all the things that worked last year, build off of those things. Jayden's going to be a year better, a year smarter. Kliff's going to be more free to do some of the things that he wasn't able to do last year because the protection up front should be better. I'm so excited about year 2 of Kliff Kingsbury, man. And I just wanted to give an ode to Kliff Kingsbury for this offensive attack that he's helped put forth. It's been phenomenal to watch. We haven't seen anything like it, again, since probably 15, 16 with Kirk Cousins and that offense with Deshaun Jackson and Pierre Garçon and Jordan Reed and Jamison Crowder and Chris Thompson and all of those guys. We haven't seen anything here like that since then. And this is a lot more fun, right? What we're watching now, because even those teams that were very prolific offensively, they didn't have the dynamic capabilities. They didn't go 2 weeks, damn near 3 weeks without punting. They didn't do that, right? They weren't rolling up 40 plus points on opponents routinely. Now that 15 team had some shit going though, right? We beat up some teams pretty good that year. Buffalo beat them up pretty good. The Saints drubbed them. So we had some games where we beat up some teams pretty good in 15. We rolled up 38, I believe, on Green Bay. So we had some games. I think that might have been 2016, though. But we had some games in 15. We had some games in 16. But no, it wasn't like 2024, right? So we were feasting on 40 burgers last year. We were sitting guys in the final frame, and it was different. And a lot of that credit, because, again, this wasn't like, the defense were producing 5 turnovers in a game like they did against Detroit. Like, we put up all those points against Carolina, because the defense was huge in that game. Pick 6, interception. I think they had a 4th down stop. So those things help. Remember, just in case you forgot, Jayden Daniels gets hurt in the Carolina game, and we have 20 points in the first half up until the final drive. We had 2 passing yards. 2 passing yards going into that final drive of the first half. 2 passing yards. And we were up 20-0. So it's one of the few games where the defense said, hey, we got you. But most of the time, when we put up those big points, they did it on their own, right? Tennessee was another game where, special teams got them a turnover, defense got them a turnover, and they turned those turnovers into points. But once again, that was mostly the offense. Arizona was mostly the offense, right? Cleveland or Cincinnati, mostly the offense. Cleveland, mostly the offense. Defense was good that game against Cleveland, but they weren't creating short fields. They weren't turning Cleveland Browns over. They took it away one time in that game. So, again, this offense had to do a lot. And shout out to Kliff Kingsbury for being able to adjust in those 2 games where Jayden, basically didn't play, whether it was pretty much didn't play the second half. He didn't play the second half at all against Dallas in the second game, and didn't play after the first drive against Carolina, and not having to overhaul the entire playbook or his play calling because of the skill sets being similar between Mariota and Jayden, but still doing a great job of putting Mariota in positions where he was comfortable to go out and execute in those 2 games that ended up being victories. And shout out to Kliff for also not putting Jayden in a position where he was vulnerable as a rookie. We remember games. I remember a game in Joe Burrow's rookie season against the Browns on a Thursday night. And I remember my guy Derek B saying, this is ridiculous. I've never seen anything like this. Joe Burrow had over 30 first half attempts against the Browns on a Thursday night in his rookie season. He ended up having, I think, like 57 pass attempts in that game, something crazy in that game. And like, we never put Jayden in that position, despite how the defense might have been playing, despite the lack of a run game in situations, even being down in certain games, like the Chicago game late, like the Philadelphia game, the second one. There were games where we had to rely heavily on Jayden, and not one time in the regular season did Jayden Daniels exceed 40 pass attempts. That's a testament. And maybe that's more of DQ. And I don't want to give all the credit to, because Kliff himself said DQ's had to come over to me a couple of times and say, hey, don't forget to run the football. Because Kliff sees the talent in Jayden, and he's like, I'd just air this shit out, put it in Five's hands. So that probably is more of a DQ, good job. But Kliff has been excellent, and I just wanted to make sure that I gave him a cold one, a nice cold one before our time together is up. So I'm expecting big things from him in this offense in year 2, and the NFL might not know what hit him. If they think, oh, the coordinator's got film now and all that bullshit, they don't know what's coming. With the addition of Debo and the addition of Jalen Lane and Luke McCaffrey in year 2 and Noah Brown hopefully healthy in year 2 and an upgraded offensive line, and I think a more well-rounded backfield, shit could get really ugly and dark for the NFL real quick. Real effing quick. But that's going to do it for me, your man Louie T, here on this installment of the Command Post. You know what it is. Post up. Take command. I look forward to chopping it up with you guys a little bit later on. But until then, you guys take care. Have a good one. Peace. LouieTeeNetwork.